Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a variety of topics through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. The topics presented here and the ideas examined here may be relevant to a wide variety of jobs and industries. Additionally, ideas presented here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I invite you to examine what is presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Personal boundaries are a good idea anywhere, but that can be especially true at the workplace. Setting boundaries can be helpful in preventing or avoiding a wide variety of problems, things like misunderstandings or inappropriate behaviors. Those could be things like sexist or racist or otherwise inappropriate talk or humor or behaviors, or sexual harassment or incivility or bullying at work. Furthermore, setting personal boundaries can be helpful with avoiding other types of problems. For example, task assignment problems or role assignment ambiguities or project or task responsibilities. In general, the biggest benefit of strong personal boundaries comes in the form of prevention. It's much better to prevent an issue before it becomes a problem over having to deal with the actual problem. So if personal boundaries sound like a good idea, it's because they are. In order for personal boundaries to be most effective, there are several things that we must first consider. First, it's critical that you know your own values and limits. Setting personal boundaries should be guided, at least in part, by your values and limits. If you don't know what your values and limits are, you will have a pretty difficult time properly defining your personal boundaries. How can you definitively know or tell where your boundaries lie if you don't know what your limits are, or what your values are for that matter? So as you can see, knowing your own values and limits is the first step to figuring out your personal boundaries. In order for your personal boundaries to be helpful, others have to know about them. Personal boundaries are far less effective if no one else knows what they are. If other people know that, one, you have personal boundaries, and two, what those boundaries actually are, it's much easier for others to work within those boundaries and to interact within those boundaries when they interact with you. Of course, how you communicate your personal boundaries to others is critical. If you are calm, assertive, and professional, you'll get a lot further than when your style of communication includes highly emotional outbursts or states or other unprofessional type of behaviors. If you're calm, assertive, and professional while you're communicating your personal boundaries, you're much more likely to be taken seriously. On the other hand, if you are emotional or show otherwise unprofessional behavior, you're much more likely to be dismissed and not taken seriously. Consistency is key. You can't go back and forth on what your boundaries are. If you respond to another person's behavior as though it's acceptable one day, but then another day you respond to it as though it's not acceptable and offensive to you in some way, you're sending mixed messages. When you're sending mixed messages, you're causing confusion. You are much less likely to get the type of results that you want. When people are confused, they don't know how to act around you. When people see mixed messages coming from you, they're much less likely to take you seriously. An even worse example would be you engaging in behavior one day that maybe another time you claim for that same behavior to be offensive because it came from someone else or because it targeted a demographic with which you identify. In other words, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You can't tell inappropriate jokes, for example, and then be upset that someone else is telling inappropriate jokes. You can't behave in offensive or inappropriate ways only to claim that others can't do the same thing. So the bottom line is you have to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to the types of behaviors and the types of environments that you find acceptable in terms of your personal boundaries. As you can see, personal boundaries don't have to be complicated. As a matter of fact, it's best if they're clear, well-defined, and straightforward, and easy for others to understand. And while setting clear personal boundaries and properly communicating them to others is best, there are no guarantees when it comes to other people's behaviors. But generally speaking, if we explain to others that a behavior is offensive or inappropriate at work, for the most part, people will take that seriously and adjust their own behaviors accordingly. Of course, if you have clearly defined and properly communicated your personal boundaries with others at work and continue to experience inappropriate behaviors from others or hostile environment conditions, hostile experiences at the workplace, it's important to consider taking matters to the next step, meaning having a conversation with your supervisor or someone in the HR department. The bottom line is that everyone deserves to have a good work experience where they are respected and treated well at work. Abuse, disrespect, or incivility, or any such thing is neither necessary nor acceptable at the workplace, or any other place for that matter. As today's episode comes to an end, let's review what was presented. In order for you to set and successfully execute your personal boundaries at the workplace, there are several things to consider. First, know your own values and limits. They should play a role in defining your personal boundaries. If you don't know what your values and limits are, how are you going to set personal values, be it at work or anywhere else for that matter? It's important that others are aware of your personal boundaries. If people are kept in the dark, we can't expect them to guess, and to guess properly, to guess correctly. How you communicate your personal values makes a big difference. Remember, calm, assertive, and professional is much more effective than emotional or otherwise unprofessional attempts of communication. And finally, consistency is key. Remember, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk if you want others to take your personal boundaries seriously. And if, despite your efforts at defining and setting your personal boundaries, you're still experiencing resistance at work, inappropriate behaviors, or hostile environment, it's up to you to take the issue to the next level, to find someone who can help, such as your supervisor or someone in the HR department. As the week unfolds, I invite you to examine your own personal boundaries at the workplace. Where do you stand in terms of your personal boundaries? Are they clear? Are they well defined? Have you communicated them to those you work with? Is there room for improvement? Finally, examine what you know about the personal boundaries of the other people that you work with. How do you respond to their personal boundaries? Are your behaviors reflective of a respectful type of relationship with your coworkers where you take into consideration their personal boundaries? And if you don't know the personal boundaries of the other people around you, it's still important to examine your own behaviors and consider whether your behaviors, how you're acting at work, may be detrimental to somebody else's experience at the workplace. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.